Rosetta, with a tray in her hands, heads straight down the corridor. Someone shouts to the girl that there is something ahead, but it's too late. The protagonist steps in a puddle and falls. The maid Rosetta is too delicate that she faints at every opportunity, and also very absent-minded. They say that such people are actually very resilient, but she constantly faints. The other maids notice that this is the third time this week. Despite this, the other maids do not dislike Rosalette. Besides her beautiful looks and noble origin, there was a certain charm about her that attracted others. But the biggest reason was that everyone who held this position spiraled out of the palace within 3 days. After all, there was a mad prince there. However, it was Rosetta who was fulfilling the role of Prince Armand Baldwin von Ragnar's chambermaid. Now the girl is walking down the corridor and sees 2 maids who are holding a tray with tea and pick up a knife. The girl approaches them and asks what the servants are up to and if they have decided to harm the prince with it. The 2 lads look among themselves and say that it turns out that the trembling doe of the imperial palace is also here. One of them picks up a knife and says that whoever saw something he shouldn't have seen should definitely fall into eternal sleep. The boy apologizes to Rosaletta and pounces on her with the knife, but the young lady quickly twists his arm, and the guy finds himself already wounded himself. The protagonist asks what he is doing here with such skills, and if he is not sorry. The other servant is already shaking with fear and claims that the girl has been hiding her identity all this time, and therefore all their attempts to finish off the prince have been fruitless. The girl walks beside him and plunges him into an eternal sleep as well. She apologizes to Gerald and repeats his words that the one who saw what he should not have seen should certainly fall into eternal sleep. After that, the girl heads down the corridor, and from behind she is called by a maid. She asks where the girl has been for so long, and she claims that she carelessly fell into the pond, so she was delayed. But in fact, the protagonist did not fall into the pond, but hid there the traces of her recent actions. The maid argues that this could well have happened to Rosalind. She claims that the girl is enticed by the prince and must go quickly. The young lady agrees and says she is on her way. When she enters Armand's room, she asks her to forgive her for being late. The guy got to the other world 4 times already. In this life, the protagonist must certainly save him, because this time she became not a knight, but a servant, and did the right thing. However, now the prince touches the girl's face and calls her his Rosie. The guy claims that he thought he would go crazy while he was waiting for her. The young lady doesn't understand why the man is suddenly blushing. The brunette runs his finger over her lips and gets closer to her face, and Rosetta thinks in her mind that this is unacceptable. In a past life, she went to her friend and told him to turn back time, but the blonde claimed he didn't know what the consequences might be. The girl said it didn't matter. Rosetta Mayfield, the strongest knight in the Empire, the Archmage's best friend and only swordmaster, as well as the Crown Prince's personal knight who had failed to protect her master. With the help of a sword given to her by the prince, she traveled back 10 years. However, His Highness was finished off before she returned. Unless Rosetta can prevent Armand's demise, she will be back in her 20s. The girl tried to tell the prince about her return so that they could make a plan of action together, but the only way she had left was to be able to freely enter his room, to be near and guard him at all times. So this time, Rosetta became a chambermaid in the imperial palace. The main maid, Maria, came to introduce a new maid to the brunette. The protagonist realizes that this is the prince's room. Previously, when she was a knight who could not be there. The girl with a brilliant smile on her face states that she is glad to meet you. She introduces herself and says that her name is Rosetta Mayfield and she is the daughter of Baron Mayfield. The girl will serve him faithfully. But the prince only coldly replies well. The protagonist is furious, for he did not even look at her. He was not so impolite before. The girl thinks it might be because she is a servant girl. This is the first time she is greeted so coldly, but for Rosetta, this attitude was a new stimulus. The girl decides from this day on to act slowly so that the prince will let her his heart in. From behind, another maid looks at the protagonist. She thinks that there is something in her, since the girl has applied for the position of the prince's chambermaid. but realizes that except for her face, there is nothing special about her. The girl with green hair decides to show the young lady where she belongs before she starts bragging about her origins. The maid approaches her colleague and claims that the maid's uniform suits her better than an ordinary dress, and adds in her thoughts that the unsightly rags are just made for the girl. But the protagonist only smiles and thanks Melanie. She claims that she really likes these clothes too. The girl with green hair thinks what an idiot the young lady is and wonders if she has flowers instead of brains. The protagonist shakes hands with her interlocutor and states that she also likes the uniform very much. She also adds that she is glad to meet her. After that, Melanie and the other maids constantly followed Rosetta to catch her in hypocrisy. Well, she always behaved the same way after all. Now, the lady with green hair approaches the protagonist and tells the lady to try the cookies that she specially brought for her. She also adds that the maid should not let others tempt them herself and stuffs the cookies into Rosetta's mouth, after which she walks away primly. The other and the maid saw this and claims that the girl treats her like a little child and in fact hated her the most at first. Melanie claims she didn't like the protagonist at first, but it is worth pointing out Rosetta's mistakes, as she immediately apologizes, looking for a job herself and trying to do as the girl taught her. She even helps in the work of other maids. The lady with green hair asks, how can you not love such a person? And most importantly, when the girls look at the main character with a cookie in her hands and see her smile, it blinds their eyes. They can't help but smile at something like that as well. One of the maids says that people who can smile like that have an easy life and thinks that even Prince Armand won't be affected by it. Another maid says that since it's about the prince, isn't Melanie on cleaning duty for that room today? The green-haired lady shrieks at this news. Rosetta runs up to her and asks what happened and why she suddenly screamed. One of the maids says that Melanie has to clean the prince's room today, and the protagonist asks what's so terrible about it. But in response, she hears another question about whether she knows what rumors about him. The brown-haired woman assures her that people say His Highness is crazy. Rosetta only smiles softly at those words and offers her colleague to clean the room in the prince's place her. The lady with green hair is very touched by such a thing that she almost cries with joy. The protagonist then goes to the door of Armith and remembers that it is obligatory to knock twice, then say why she came, and humbly wait for the prince's answer. The young lady does so and tells the reason for her visit. His Highness tells the girl to come in, and Rosetta realizes that it is time to tame Armand. The boy stands propped against the wall and looks at the maid with coldness in his gaze. The girl, however, thinks about how to make the prince feel comfortable. She realizes that His Highness prefers maids who silently do their work, but at this rate she will become a simple maid who only works. The protagonist looks at the guy and realizes that if she acts too friendly, he will become wary of her. Armand was originally the second prince on his way to the throne. He had to overcome many dangers, so he didn't trust anyone. His Highness didn't have a personal servant, and while cleaning, he closely watched the servants. That's why no one wants to serve him, and they say he's a crazy prince. However, he is so demanding only in his work. The protagonist opens the window and tells Armand that she is done with the cleaning, but he still looks at her coldly. The girl claims that the weather is so nice and asks if she can open the window and let the prince enjoy this warm and gentle breeze. The guy interrupts her half-heartedly and tells her that if she is done, she can go. The girl approaches the door and says that if the prince needs anything, he can call her at any time. After she closes the door, there is a loud noise in the hallway. The maid asks her co-worker if she's banged up again and suggests she watch her step. The brunette, on the other hand, wonders if Rosetta is just a fool. The lady with green hair asks the girl if she is okay and if nothing has happened. But the protagonist argues that her co-worker shouldn't worry because she's tough. She tells Melanie that she just has to become the prince's personal maid. The girl asks if the young lady can cope with this, because even experienced maids refuse this job. The protagonist says that she thinks she can cope, because the prince is very friendly with her. The maid asks her colleague only not to faint in front of him. The next day, Rosetta gets to work. She wipes the furniture in the room of the brunette. The guy remembers that the girl said that she cleans once every 3 days. Well, she comes to his room every day, and it's very strange. But unlike her predecessors, who were constantly engaged in extraneous matters, Bread disappeared without any warning. The girl does not behave suspiciously, and it's not so bad. The protagonist turns to His Highness and says that the weather is fantastic. She asks if the prince wants to go for a walk. She then adds that his room is always so neat and asks how he manages to do it, then answers her own question with a guess that the guy has a neat character. The young lady claims that there is, however, a messy one among the maids, who says that her room has been so full of junk since childhood that there was only room left for sleeping. Armand is already tiring of her chatter. Rosetta, on the other hand, continues her monologue and asks if His Highness is hungry. But the guy orders her to stop, and the protagonist, with a smile on her face, obeys. But after that, she still continues to talk about the fact that when she helped the maid in the laundry today, she saw something unusual. But the prince interrupts her and says that if she is finished, she can go. The young lady leaves His Highness's room and realizes that he doesn't allow himself too much, not even to complain. She has been trying so hard for weeks now, and his heart has not warmed to her in the slightest. But the girl realizes that still she should not despair, and tomorrow she needs to be a little more assertive. The next day, she comes to see His Highness again. The guy sits at the table with a cup of tea and does not react to the maid. The same realizes that he is the same today as always. Suddenly, the protagonist knocks the cup out of his hands and rolls the prince on the floor, and the latter, in shock, does not understand what this means. The young lady tries to open his mouth with her finger, while the guy tries to call his servant, and the girl only asks him to open his mouth wider, but he bites her finger. Rosetta comes close to Armand's ear and asks His Highness to forgive her for her rudeness. The guy has no time to realize what is happening, but their lips touch in a kiss. The next day, the protagonist wakes up in bed. The guy asks the maid if she is awake already. His Highness states that from now on, he will be responsible for her. The young lady does not understand what he is talking about. Before Rosetta passed out, she kissed the prince. Unexpected kisses always have a reason. As the girl cleaned her room, she wondered if there was any way to make friends with the prince quickly. She had been a knight all her life, after all, so nothing comes to mind. The girl is distracted from her thoughts by the pleasant aroma of tea. She suddenly realizes that it is the smell of deadly poison. She realizes that she must drink at least the poison that Armand has in his mouth. Richard hears His Highness calling for him and bursts into the room, but catches only a picture of the maid looming over the brunette. The knight pulls her hand away, and with a shout asking if His Highness is all right, he yells for someone to call a priest. The protagonist says, right now, "Call a priest." And after that, she too faints from the poison. The girl keeps thinking like a 30-year-old and doesn't realize how she lived before. Armand takes her out of her thoughts. He asks how the girl realized that there was poison in the tea, and she replies that she had once encountered that smell and asks if they understood the criminal. The prince says the criminal had already killed himself. Then the lady with the red hair asks if he has regained his health. His Highness says yes. That is why he is here. The protagonist looks at Armand and realizes that his manner of speech is not the most pleasant, but he answers all her questions so clearly. In this case, the girl is ready to drink poison 100 times more. The guy clenches his fists and claims that he is perfectly fine, except that the girl drank too much poison, so it is likely that she will fall into a maimed sleep in a few days. Now the young lady understands why he treated her so well. Armand says that if she needs anything, he will fulfill her request before the girl dies, and tells the one to consider taking her life in his stead. Rosetta realizes that there has been a misunderstanding, because normally a servant girl would not have survived such a dose of poison, but she is a master of the sword, so she will be fine, although she cannot tell the truth. The young lady wonders if she should tell her that she has a special body, but then she realizes that this could be a great chance for her. She says that everything is fine and His Highness shouldn't bother, because who knows, she might survive. She's very strong. The brunette already knew she was a fool and seems to have gone completely insane because of the poison. His Highness says it's too bad, but there's almost no chance of survival. The protagonist says that in such a case, she has one cherished wish. The young lady asks His Highness to allow Hei to be near him because she would like to serve him to the last. The guy claims that the girl will soon lose her life if she understood everything correctly. Tony would appeal to him with such a request. The protagonist realizes how untrustworthy he is. Rosetta says that she will sink into eternal sleep anyway, and hey, there is no point in sending all her jewelry to the family with whom she has bad relations, and it is better to serve His Highness to the end and gain posthumous glory. This request was burdensome for Armand, however. He understood his maid's desire to find meaning in her life. He places his hand on the protagonist's shoulder and states that he will guard her last days. Rosetta then holds out a contract to him and states that her name is Rosetta Mayfield for short, Rosa or Rosie, and she was born during the rose blooming season. The brunette says she has little time left, and her habit of talking non-stop is still the same. The maid says she will be quiet and suggests that His Highness read the document she has given him. The boy reads it aloud. It says that he is Prince Ragnar of the Empire, Armand Baldwin von Ragnar, appointing Rosetta Mayfield as his only personal maid until her death. Not long afterward, a maid with green hair comes running into the protagonist's room. She tearfully says that she has been told that Rosetta will soon sink into eternal sleep. The girl doesn't understand how this could happen, and the protagonist claims that it's not like that because the priest healed her. It's just that the rumors are too overblown. She spins around and reveals that there are no wounds on her body. Rosetta claims that she is in perfect health. Then the lady with green hair runs up to her coworker and hugs her. The girl then notices that it is very late. She says that she asked the head maid and the maid allowed her to stay with Rosetta tonight. The two maids get into bed. The lady with green hair says that she feels like she has gone back to her childhood. The protagonist agrees. She realizes that she used to spend all her time training. She didn't have time to make friends, and now she has some strange feeling. The young lady turns to Melanie and tells her that she has someone she would like to become closer to. The main character asks what it would take to do that. The lady with green hair jumps out of bed and asks if the person his friend would like to become closer to is a man. Rosetta replies that yes, and in thought adds that he looks like a cute turtle. The lady with green hair asks if that man is Sir Richard, but the protagonist does not understand who her interlocutor is talking about. The girl claims that it doesn't matter, since he is so unemotional. Melanie claims that to become closer to a man, it is important to touch him. The next day, the protagonist comes to the prince. The same claims that he does not need a maid for bathing and does not have such shameless passions. The young lady says that still it will be much more comfortable for him, but the guy claims that he refused. She continues to insist and asks if this can be regarded as having some other purpose for the girl. He thinks that after such words, any chaste girl will run away in shame, but the protagonist only takes the prince by the hand. The guy jumps back a couple of steps and concludes that her goal was actually his body. Rosetta is happy because His Highness has finally realized that she wants to get closer to him. When Armand has taken a bath, the young lady offers to help him change, but he only shouts that he has already said that he does not need help. The young lady goes out into the corridor and says what a prince he is. Richard stands nearby and asks if the girl is talking about the prince. The maid asks if he will keep what he just heard a secret. The lad smiles and says he will, then asks if the maid is all right. But she says she is well and says that if the lad has heard that she is about to fall into eternal sleep, it is an idle rumor. Richard says he's already been told by the other maids. He wants to apologize to the young lady for being rude to her. Rosetta, on the other hand, claims she wants to talk to him as well. She says that she is perfectly fine, but thinks that the knight should have been more proactive because the prince's safety is more important than anything else. Richard is touched by such words. He smiles and says that Rosetta is a deep person. The speech is primarily concerned not about himself, but about the prince. The protagonist does not understand why he is so agitated. After all, she just gave him advice, as a knight with experience because the guy's actions were too slow. The knight asks if the young lady has any time this weekend, and the young lady is perplexed. Suddenly, someone opens the door and says she has no time. It is the prince. He pulls down a button on his sleeve and claims that the maid will be busy helping him. The protagonist is touched by this. His Highness, on the other hand, thinks that this girl needed more than just him, and the guy should protect Richard. Then the brunette heads onward, and Rosetta asks if he's heading to the main palace and offers to escort him. The guy says no need. The puppy-eyed protagonist says she'll hold a sun umbrella over him and also tell him interesting stories along the way. His Highness thinks how annoyed he is with her, but agrees and says he'll listen while the girl carries the umbrella. As they head outside, they see an umbrella being held by 3 knights, and Armand says that the girl will go with him if only she can carry that umbrella. Richard doesn't understand how the girl will carry such a heavy umbrella. The protagonist asks in her mind if the prince wants her to carry it with such fragile hands. But not long after, the 3 of them are already walking under the umbrella held by the young lady. She tells the story that the tears of Irkia are actually earrings and were in the possession of the ruler of the kingdom of Aspel. The girl looks at the brunette's face and realizes that he is just fascinated by her stories. After all, she has been around him for about 10 years, so she can immediately understand. His Highness asks where the girl heard such information, and she says that she does not even know because it was so long ago that she does not even remember. But in fact, it was she who killed that king and took the famous earrings. But she can't tell him that. Rosetta says she's done for the day. When Armand asks why, she replies that they're already here. The girl folds her umbrella. The knight says he is ashamed to admit it, but he listened with such attention that he did not have time to ask how the maid carried such a heavy umbrella. The protagonist with it in her hands says that Sir Richard seems to underestimate the maid's work. It is not heavy for her at all, and among the maids she is considered quite strong. The prince realizes that the girl seemed strong to him last time too. She grabbed him, and with her lips. But he drives these thoughts away from him. His Highness moves on and asks why his servants are standing around and not coming in. As the protagonist heads back down the road, she thinks that some umbrella is nothing compared to a sword. The girl looks at her reflection in the fountain and realizes that the body of a 20-year-old is too weak compared to what she was at 30. It will take about 5 years to become a sword master this time too. The girl sits on the fountain and thinks how unbearable it is. She also has almost no time to train because of her job as a maid. The girl realizes that she should meet with Valerian and ask if there is any way. Valerian Windsorfield at 15 became the youngest archmage of the Ragnar Empire, a genius among geniuses, the pride of the empire, who refused the honorable title of the next master of the magic tower and swore an oath to the imperial family. Also, Rosetta's closest friend, even closer than a blood relative. The protagonist realizes that maidservants do not have the opportunity to visit the main palace often, so they rarely see him in this life. Suddenly, the girl hears someone calling her name. She turns around and sees her friend there. Rosetta steps on his shoes and asks him with a shout what he is doing in the middle of the garden of the main palace. The young lady then claims that he could have ducked but didn't and calls Valerian a pervert. He tearfully asks what kind of pervert he is, for he did not dodge on purpose to please the young lady. When the lad was still very young, his mouth was ruined, and Rosetta's mother, Baroness Mayfield, took Valerian under her wing. Valerian treated Rosetta as his own sister, for she was his age, but unfortunately he had lost all contact with his sister. For the young lady, the guy in turn was instead of a sibling. With him she felt at ease. However, his only drawback was an excessive display of emotions, which he simply poured out on Rosetta even as an adult. The protagonist thinks that with other people, he clearly separates personal and public, and does not understand why, however, with her, he behaves like a loyal dog. When the girl sees his face, she always forgives him for everything. The young lady tells him to keep himself to himself, because in the past life, because of him, there were different rumors about them. Here she is a servant, so she needs to be more careful. The Archmage remembers that in her past life, she was a knight, and asks when Rosetta will tell him about it. The girl says she will visit him in the lab as soon as she has things sorted out, and Valerian agrees. The protagonist tells him not to worry, because in this life she has made friends, so she has fun living. The The guy is happy about this and says that he is proud of the young lady. He also asks if he can hug her. But the girl says you can't because there's someone coming over here. She asks if the blonde man wants her chances of getting married to come to naught this time too. However, the man is far away, so the girl agrees to hug him once. The young lady says that next time she will not give in to Valerian because unlike him, she is a well-mannered girl. The blonde tells her not to be sick. After that, they say their goodbyes. When the girl steps further away, she sees His Highness. He doesn't look very pleased. The guy asks who the man was that the maid just cuddled with. The protagonist realizes that he might have seen her and Valerian. She recalls that Prince Armand saw much better than the other knights during training and realizes that she should behave more confidently. The young lady claims he is a friend of hers who works at the main palace. His Highness says that he is quite tall, and the maid adds that he also has a sturdy build. The brunette thinks that it's quite possible Rosetta is secretly seeing someone. The protagonist realizes that's what he thought, and it's all because of his persecution mania. The prince asks what kind of work this guy is doing, but the protagonist does not let him finish and coughs into a handkerchief. The red liquid remains on her lips, and the girl's hands are shaking. The young lady almost faints, but the brunette grabs her. The maid did not expect such a turn in any way. She realizes that the brunette doubts her, but she still feels guilty. She cannot miss such a chance. Rosetta thanks His Highness for catching her, and thanks to him, she is still alive. The guy clenches his fists and asks what she means, and in his thoughts, he adds that it is because of him that this is happening to her, and he is the one who finished her off anyway. The young lady looks at the prince and thinks he has something of a sad expression on his face. The young lady claims she's perfectly fine, but if His Highness stands in the sun, his skin might get ruined, so we have to go back. Armand says she's right and the sun is too baking, so they should go back. When they get back to the prince's room, the protagonist thanks him again for catching her when she almost fell. Oh, thanks, she'll help him change. But the guy says a firm no. He asks the maid not to misunderstand because he was just worried that there would be rumors about him if the maid fell right in front of him. The protagonist in her thoughts is indignant about this because just now his eyes were full of sadness and the guy pretends that he does not love her, but he himself tries to help. The lady with red hair thinks that he looks like the cat Palo, which she had as a child. Now she remembers her with a smile and reflects on how cute she was. But now His Highness tells the protagonist that he let her in because she promised to clean up the bedroom so she should finish up soon and leave. Rosetta is not disappointed about this and starts cleaning His Highness's room, and he is watching her as always. When the girl wipes the table, she sees flowers that have long since wilted, but have been standing there for quite some time. The protagonist does not think that Armand has such strange hobbies and ponders whether they could have been left by the senior maid. The prince turns to the maid and tells her to leave the bouquet as it is. The maid asks if a dear man gave them to His Highness, and the man with a serious expression says yes. The lady with the red hair already guesses that it might be a gift from Lady Runiella. The Runiella family is the only ducal family in the empire that had close relations with the imperial palace, but just the name of the duke's only daughter, Faisley Teresa von Runiella, can shake up the entire high society. Rosetta's half-sister did her best to please Lady Runiella, but Rosetta herself was not going to help her in this, and besides, she had no reason to communicate with the lady. The reason Rosetta remembered her well, however, was that she would be marrying Armand in a few years. This marriage was a formal one, but because of the prince's complicated character, the relationship between them was very cold. The protagonist wonders if the future could have changed if he talks about a dear person, although she feels even better if they become closer. The prince says he thinks the maid has been doing too much cleaning lately. The lady with the red hair claims that frequent changes of underwear are good for the skin, while the brunette claims it's just appearances. The young lady asks how he can say such words with such looks. After all, he just has amazing skin, and one should not take it so lightly. Even just looking at her already lifts his spirits. Armand himself knew that he looked quite attractive, but the people around him didn't dare to say a word, afraid of his gaze. Rosetta was the first to speak of it. Now the girl is screaming, "How can you say that when His Highness's looks are his most important asset, and if it wasn't for his face, she wouldn't be working there at all?" The brunette coldly asks if she is crazy and has lost all fear because she will soon fall into eternal sleep anyway. The protagonist realizes she overdid it. She apologizes to the prince and bows her head. Armand looks at her and wonders if the maid is crying. She didn't get so upset even when she learned of her imminent death. He wonders why the maid is silent. Meanwhile, the girl thinks that it is not Armand, but she who will fall into eternal sleep in this life. The young lady realizes that she will have to kneel. She is a former knight of the order, so she rushes from extreme to extreme. His Highness says that it's nothing terrible because the girl is sick, but the protagonist falls on her knees before him and asks her to forgive, because she was wrong. The guy is shocked by such actions. He grabs his maid by the arm and asks what she is doing. As he wraps his arm around her wrist, who wonders why she is so thin. His Highness tells his maid not to do anything stupid, and the maid thinks it seems to have worked and agrees. The brunette presses his hand to his chest and closes his eyes for a moment. After that, he asks the girl if she likes pears. Rosetta doesn't understand what he's talking about because in Korean, pear and boat sound and spell the same. An awkward silence hangs in the air. The young lady notices it, and he raises his hand to say that he loves her very much. Then the prince orders her to be ready by 11 o'clock tomorrow morning. The protagonist does not understand what he means, and then claims that he will give the girl good memories for last. After Rosetta leaves the rest of His Highness, she is glad that Armand was the first to offer to meet, but for some reason she thinks that the brunette might have plotted to deceive her. The next day she arrives in a simple white dress and searches for His Highness. Her gaze is caught by two guys. It's the prince and Richard. The protagonist rejoices, for the brunette has indeed come, Armand tells her, to stop and gets into the carriage. Rosetta, on the other hand, pinches her cheek and realizes that, judging by his rude tone, this isn't a dream after all. As they carriage ride to their destination, the brunette asks if it was necessary to dress like that. The protagonist claims that she just didn't have the right clothes, and the knight asks if her things from the baron's estate have arrived yet. The young lady says that this is the most appropriate outfit for a boat ride, and the prince doesn't understand how the baron's daughter can't have normal clothes. She is an aristocrat by birth, who became a servant. Her hands have calluses, and the girl kneels on her knees. The prince concludes that she was bullied at Mayfield Manor and suffered from relatives all her life, so she went into the servants' quarters, and in the end, she should be struck into eternal sleep instead of him. Rosetta, on the other hand, thinks the dress is too uncomfortable to work out in, so her closet. Apart from pants, nothing can be found. The girl doesn't understand if the lack of clothes is such a problem. Armand says that if necessary, he will buy the maid's clothes. The young lady thanks him, but says that it is not worth it because she doesn't really need them. Richard is surprised that the girl refused him so politely. However, the main character already has everything she needs, and since the guy wants to do something for her, let them not fall into eternal sleep this time. When they arrive at the place, Rosetta extends her hand to His Highness. The man claims that helping her out of the carriage is his job. The girl apologizes and says that she is confused, adding in her thoughts that she has a leftover habit from her past life. When they approach the lake, the young lady says how beautiful it is and offers to get on the boat, but the brunette only wishes her a good walk. The protagonist does not understand what he means and asks if His Highness will go with her. The same asks why she thinks not, since he meant that the girl will sail alone. Armand says that everything they need is already loaded on the boat. Rosetta is shocked. She wonders where the prince has seen people who go on a boat alone because she doesn't even like it, floating on the water and talking about nothing. A girl would rather swing a sword. However, the reason she agreed to this was to spend some alone time with Armand. She wipes the tears from her eyes and asks if she really has to go alone. His Highness barely overpowers himself and says that so be it, he will sail with her. The young lady realizes that she did not try and prepare the ground in vain. She grabs His Highness by the hand and asks if he will really keep her company, and then she thanks him with a bright smile, and he says that he will, if the maid does not talk so much. Richard looks at all this. He thinks that he has only been serving the prince for a year and doesn't know how to thank him since he gave him such a chance. The knight is already imagining how he will go with the young lady on the boat and realizes that he will have to show His Highness his respect. But Armand tells Richard to stay on the shore. The servant doesn't know what he's talking about, and the prince argues that at least one of them should stay ashore for safety's sake. The knight is already crying, but realizes it's a valid argument. The couple headed out for a ride on the water, the boat being steered automatically by a magical device. The protagonist sits on it. She thought it would be worse, but this scenery, and against the background of the landscape of the appearance of His Highness, looks very beautiful. The young lady is like looking at a painting. The brunette turns to her and notices that she is staring at him like that. The protagonist realizes that the guy has noticed her staring at him and asks if he likes the boat ride. His Highness says he doesn't, and Rosetta asks why. The lad remembers drowning in one of the pools when he was little. His brother laughed at him and poked him with his finger. There was only one thought on the brunette's mind, and it was that he couldn't protect anyone, not even himself. His Highness states that there are unpleasant memories associated with this. The maid is worried about her master, but the latter claims that it is not worth worrying about it and asks why she was sent to his palace, where she had only trouble. The girl does not understand what he is talking about and claims that she volunteered. The prince asks why she volunteered because he knows that rumors do not want to work in his palace. The protagonist holds out her hand and claims she is here to protect the prince. Armand asks how she has the strength to protect him, but the girl claims that he saw her carrying an umbrella and she saved His Highness once. Armand says that her life is now because of that. Suddenly, the boat shakes and the protagonist falls on the prince. And the guy says that she couldn't protect herself if even such a jolt is enough for her to fall. How is she going to protect him? Rosetta's heart is pounding very fast. The young lady was not one to shy away from touch. With Valerian, they often held hands and hugged each other, which was seen as completely normal, but now it was different. That's why it embarrasses her so much. The protagonist realizes that one must not show His Highness her embarrassment. Rosetta looks at the brunette and tries to think about the fact that he is just like Valerian. The girl thanks His Highness and claims he saved her, but the man claims he's not worth the thanks and asks how much longer she'll sit on him. The protagonist says a little longer so she doesn't fall off again. When she sees the look on the prince's face, she immediately sits down on the couch across from him and claims that it is not allowed for her to behave like this. After all, these are the prince's precious lap. His Highness says that he cannot understand why the girl continues to behave so casually with a man who is about to fall into a maimed sleep and protects him, risking her life. Rosetta is silent and thinks that the reason why she started to return again and again to the past is because Armand was her first failure. What kind of a knight is she if she failed to protect her master? The girl was angry with herself as she relentlessly went back in time, suppressing all emotions and feelings within herself. The only thing she kept thinking about was that she just wanted His Highness to be alive. Even if the guy doesn't learn anything, even if he has to become an ordinary person, the protagonist asks him to just keep living. Now the protagonist claims that the reason she's trying to protect His Highness is a secret. The same one is puzzled, and the young lady claims that a maid can have at least one secret after all. The brunette is simply speechless. Rosetta says that in any case, her desire to protect her lord is genuine. The guy has seen enough people who say the same thing, however, all of them as one. Suddenly, the engine of the boat stops, and the young lady realizes that the magical device has broken. However, it is too strange for a simple accident. The girl tells His Highness to be careful, for it is quite deep, but when she looks at the couch across from her, it is already empty. The brunette is already in the lake. He ponders what the lowly expression is sincere, for everyone who said such words ended up giving it to him. The guy is already almost in a blackout. He is already ready to give up and closes his eyes. But he hears some strange sound. He opens his eyes and sees a young lady in front of him. The young lady grabs his arm and pulls him outside. Rosetta asks if His Highness is all right. Someone says he is, but the protagonist only tells him not to move. She wraps her arms around the guy and gets him to shore. The knight at this time shouts if His Highness is hurt and offers to grab the rope, but what he sees leaves him in shock. The young lady drags the brunette in her arms. She tells Richard that the prince must be carried to his private chambers immediately. When Armand wakes up, he sees a maid and a knight in front of him. Richard asks His Highness if he is awake and claims to have used magic to change him and dry his clothes, and he need not worry about the rumors. The prince asks how long he has been unconscious. The servant replies that it hasn't been an hour yet, and Armand wonders who saw the whole thing. Richard says they acted as stealthily as possible. The brunette then asks why the priest didn't come. After a moment of silence, the knight states that the low-level priest administered first aid, and the grand priest is delayed because the first prince hurt himself during training. Armand clutches the sheets and says that this isn't even funny, and what kind of training could it be? He knew that the Empress, that is the first prince's mother, was doing everything she could to sway the temple to her side. But the guy didn't think she would act out in the open. The suddenly stopped boat, the numb body, and the absence of the priest. The prince says the servant can go, the protagonist says she'll go too, but His Highness restores her. The girl thinks it might be because she was being impertinent, or because she brought him in her arms. But Armand only says the word twice, then adds that the girl has already saved him twice, and tells her thank you. The young lady turns away, and the prince asks if she is crying. Rosetta claims that she isn't, but the brunette doesn't really believe it, and asks if he said something wrong. The protagonist tearfully says that she just really liked what His Highness said. Armand rises from the bed and claims that he will realize everything the girl wishes, and even more than she thinks. But Rosetta refuses. She says that it's not worth it, because she doesn't need anything and it's enough that he is alive. But the lad looks at her coldly and claims that it is the payment for his life, and naturally he must pay dearly for it. Armand orders him to speak quickly before he forces the young lady to take the jewelry. The protagonist smiles. She recalls the moment when she fell on the brunette during their walk and tells His Highness to embrace her. The guy didn't expect such a request and asks if that's really what she wants. Rosetta says she does. Then His Highness lifts the young lady in his arms and puts her on the bed. The protagonist is puzzled and asks why His Highness is doing this on the bed, and he claims that he thought it was more comfortable, after which he tells her to get off his bed. The girl can't hold back her laughter. She says that the prince seems to be right, seeing that saving a life should be rewarded dearly. Armand asks if she wants to get something else. Rosetta says yes. When asked by the brunette what exactly she wants, the girl replies that she wants more than just a hug. She lifts the edge of her dress and pulls out a scroll that was tied to her leg. The young lady says that it is okay to hold hands and lay hugging. Rosetta states that it is also okay to drink tea together, and after that she unfolds the paper. It says it is an appointment order. The girl states that no matter what, His Highness must fulfill one wish of hers every day. The guy asks when she had time to draw it up. In response, he hears that the maid drew it up a long time ago and carried it with her just in case. The brunette says that he does not like all this, but nothing can be done because for his life there should be an equal payment. He picks up the contract and signs it. Boy, you realize that she's not going to be equal for long. Then the maid knocks and informs that the priest has arrived, and with him came the archmage. The protagonist realizes that Valerian has arrived, and if he sees this, he will raise a ruckus. After all, seeing a crumpled bed, wet clothes, and disheveled hair can be invented all sorts of things. As a child, the guy once beat up the scion of a rich family who molested her. The young lady appeals to His Highness, but he only orders the roomer to wait. They wonder if something might have happened, but then the prince tells them to come in. When the servants enter the room, the guy with white hair is greeted and claims to be a servant of the Fenlir Temple. Valerian greets His Highness as well, but his gaze stops on Rosetta. The girl, however, wonders why the prince is touching her. The boy whispers in her ear that the girl's hair is very disheveled, asking if she thinks they will not notice anything. This is the first time he touches the maid's hair, so she has to stand still. The blonde almost says the name of the protagonist, but stops in time and says that he heard that the prince was in a bad situation, so he dared to visit him. Armand asks if the rumors have already reached the main palace as well, and Valerian, and that there is no place in the imperial palace that has escaped his gaze. The Archmage says that since the priest has arrived and His Highness is in good health by the looks of it, he will leave the room with the maid. The protagonist doesn't realize that the atmosphere is kind of strange, but the guy goes on and states that the prince needs to get treatment and they will wait outside. The young lady approaches Valerian, but Armand stops her and argues for the maid to stay. Rosetta asks why, and the blonde man looks on with a fierce gaze. He whispers that if His Highness is bullying the girl, he won't just let it go. The protagonist tells him to keep his cool because she won't let you, and this time it ended in a fight. The prince asks if the girl is so eager to go to the afterlife and suggests that she not be stubborn, stay there and take the treatment. Rosetta and Valerian. At first, they don't understand what he's talking about, but when realization comes to them, the protagonist can't hold back a smile and says, well, the guy with silver hair is treating His Highness. The protagonist looks at him and realizes that the guy is talking her into getting treated. The girl, thinking he looks like her cat. Last time he was shy to show himself in front of her while bathing, but now he is completely calm. The prince orders to take care of the maid after his treatment because a few days ago she drank a sip of deadly poison. The protagonist is shocked, and the guy continues to say that he was told that she was about to fall into eternal sleep and asks if the servant can at least slightly relieve her suffering. The young lady realizes that it's not all because of the incident at the lake. The young man with silver hair says that His Highness is so worried about the servant girl and he will do everything in his power. But Rosetta is not very happy about this, because if he does everything in his power, then everyone will know that the girl is perfectly fine. She realizes that there is nothing to be done, and since this is the case, something must be thought of. The young lady tells His Highness that, to be honest, she can't take the treatment. Armand asks why, and the protagonist states that she is a very shy person by nature and would like to be treated by a woman. The brunette is shocked to hear such words. He asks if the lady is a shy person and asks what nonsense. Valerian realizes that his friend is in a difficult position. He puts his arm around her and states that during the treatment, it is necessary to bare some parts of the body, and Miss may not be comfortable showing them to a man. The blonde states that he will take care of the maid, and His Highness should quietly attend to the treatment, after which he hurries to bow out and leaves with the protagonist. When Rosetta steps out into the corridor with him, the two of them cannot contain their laughter. The young lady thanks Valerian for his help. The blonde man states that there is nothing to thank him for and asks what tea to make for the lady. Rosetta says she doesn't like magical powers being wasted. The Archmage asks why wasted if it concerns them rosy. The protagonist asks why he came to the palace, and the man says that she better tell him why she didn't say anything to him. The girl asks about what exactly, but to this she hears another question about the one who tried to poison her. The young lady claims that he has already fallen into eternal sleep, either by his own hand or by being gagged. But either way, she has a resistance to poison. Valerian is so angry his mug is cracking, he claims he can't turn a blind eye to something like this. Rosetta realizes that she should have told him everything at once, because he is about to start grumbling. The guy asks how the young lady ended up in the lake. The main character says that there were some problems with the boat, the prince suddenly lost consciousness, and they both fell into the water. The blonde man asks why he suddenly fainted. This suspicious boat malfunction and sudden fainting are most likely a reaction to the poison that was gradually building up in his body. The young lady says that if so, it could be considered an attempt on His Highness's life. Valerian asks if there were any strange objects in the room. Rosetta doesn't even know, because it's very clean, and sometimes it's not clear if the room is desirable or not. The only thing that keeps her wondering is that there were flowers there. The girl says that they have long since wilted, but still continued to stand in a vase. Blondie says he'll try to find out about the flowers. He claims that he will help, but he is worried about this situation because no matter how strong a knight Rosie is, he will not be able to fully defend himself without a sword. But the protagonist interrupts him. She shows her ball and claims that she always has it with her. The girl hides the weapon with the help of mana. This sword, given to her in a past life by the prince himself, had time magic. Valerian asks if the young lady really cares that much about it. Rosetta doesn't know what he's talking about and asks if he's talking about the sword. But the blonde says it is about the prince, since she has tried so many times to save him. The protagonist says it's only natural, since he is the lord she has sworn to serve. The archmage clenches his fists. He states that he respects Rosie's choice, but he is not going to silently watch her put herself in danger, so now he too will take active steps in this matter. The young lady thanks him and realizes that he has helped her in every life. This time she will make sure that this life will be her last. As she walks down the corridor, she thinks that she can just lie that she met with the priest. She decides not to worry too much about the flowers because she thinks that Valerian will find out everything by tomorrow. The girl hopes that they are not the problem, because these flowers were given by Lady Runiella. The next day, Rosetta receives a leaf from the archmage. Valerian writes that these flowers in a vase and were the reason when examining the ship found evidence that the magical device was touched by someone. The girl knew it. There are a lot of unforeseen events happening this time she became a maid, and it's not a good idea to relax. Rosetta heads down the hallway and greets her co-workers. She also wishes a good morning to Richard. The guy does the same and afterwards asks the girl to listen, but after a little hesitation wishes her a good day. The young lady thanks the knight and wishes him a good day as well. She wonders if Sir Richard has been like this before, but this time is different. Rosetta enters His Highness's room and wishes him a good morning. She states that his room is a bit of a mess today. She adds in her mind that he looks even more attractive with his hair messy. The prince claims that the magician said that something was bothering him, so he came to check the reaction to the poison. The protagonist asks what the result is. His Highness replies that those flowers are in a vase, but interrupts his speech and claims that she doesn't need to know that. The brunette gets up from his chair and heads over to the young lady. He tells her to better tell whether she met the priest and what he said. The maid states that the priest said she is stronger than she looks, so she will live a long time. Armund asks how many days she means by long. The protagonist, however, realizes that he was wrong, for she will live much longer than the guy thinks. She tells His Highness that she will clean up, but he says not to touch anything. The red-haired lady asks if he wants to rest some more, but Armand says he doesn't want to make her work. Rosetta states that she is a servant, after all. The boy is a little embarrassed, and then turns around and shrieks that he doesn't want his maid to faint from overwork. The maid, on the other hand, thinks it's a good thing she drank the poison after all. The maid claims that she is His Highness's personal maid, and it is her pleasure to serve him wholeheartedly. Rosetta asks not to be taken from her. She wonders how she will ever see him if she doesn't clean the place. Armand tells her to do as she wishes, and the protagonist thanks him. Suddenly, someone knocks on the door and claims that Madame Roblon is asking for his audience. The brunette says to let her wait in the drawing room, but the lady swings the door open and bursts into the room. She grabs His Highness by the arm. Armand asks what brings Betty here, and the lady tearfully cries out, what could she care less about yesterday's events? The prince asks if the rumors have spread and says that he is well, so the woman should not cry. The guy tells the lady to sit down. When the lady sits down on the chair, she sees that the guy has removed the flowers she brought him and asks about it. She claims she could have brought fresh ones, but the guy left those withered ones. His Highness claims he left them because they were from her, and new ones don't have to be brought at all. The protagonist realizes that that dear person was not Lady Runiella, but Madame Roblon. Then everything is clear to her because Madame Roblon was the nanny who raised Armand. Naturally, she takes care of Armand, and he behaves very gently and softly to her, just like in his previous life. His Highness asks if the lady remembers who she passed the flowers through. The lady claims she gave them to a servant, and the prince asks if it was Countess Milliam. Betty replies yes, She could not refuse her request. Rosetta now realizes that Madame is not a criminal. She has no reason to plunge into eternal sleep a man who is like a son to her. But Countess Milliam was a henchwoman of the current Empress, and it may be the Empress's machinations again. If this is the case, then it is clear to the protagonist why there is no evidence. Betty argues that a nanny should not stay long in a grown man's chambers and says she will go. The maid escorts her out. The woman asks if she is the new maid, and the protagonist states that she is correct. The nanny says she wonders how long the young lady will last, and Betty tells Betty not to worry, for it gives her great joy to serve the prince. The woman asks if she can ask the girl for something. She is afraid that rumors will spread, so there is no one else to ask. Rosetta presses her fist to her chest and says she would do anything for His Highness. Betty asks if in such a case the girl could not serve him at night as well. The protagonist is shocked by such a request and claims that she cannot do such a thing. The nanny apologizes and says that she meant something else. She wanted to ask Miss Rosetta to visit the prince's room in the evenings and serve him if necessary. Now then, the young lady understands and tells Madame not to worry, but asks in case the prince doesn't like it. The woman says that if he starts to say something Rosetta should refer to her, then he will not be able to object. The protagonist agrees and thinks that it will then be necessary to prepare in advance for the afternoon. Betty smiles as she gets into the carriage. She says how nice it is to have such a nice girl next to Armand. The young lady bids farewell to Madame. After that, she returns to the palace. She walks quietly down the corridor, but the maid behind her asks what she has just been talking to Madame about. Rosetta says that she asked her to serve His Highness when he sleeps. The maid asks if the girl visits a grown man's bedroom too often and is afraid of how it might cause unnecessary talk. The protagonist only tilts her head, showing that she doesn't understand what the woman is saying. And the woman says she will give Rosetta one warning. If her life is dear to her, the girl should not get too close to the prince and not go to his room alone later in the day. At night, the protagonist heads down the corridor with the firewood. She has been reborn 4 times already, but today is the first time she realized that the head maid is so unpleasant. She ponders if maybe it's all because she hasn't paid much attention to her relationships with people, which is why she's failed so far. When the young lady approaches in His Highness's room, who sees a sleeping knight, she claims that she sees him hard at work. The lad immediately wakes up and asks what Rosetta is doing there at such a time. The protagonist states that she is going to put some wood in the fireplace. The young man with red hair says that the prince asked that no one be allowed in his room at night, but with a bright smile on his face says that he thinks the maid is an exception. The young lady realizes he has no common sense. She walks into His Highness's room and thinks she doesn't like the guy because he is negligent in his duties and not vigilant enough. She looks at the brunette and thinks he sleeps like an angel and wishes he could be like that in life. Suddenly, Armand opens his eyes. The protagonist tries to straighten up, but the guy doesn't let her finish and grabs her wrist. He rolls her off the bed. Rosetta asks His Highness to forgive her because he misunderstood everything, and Madame Reborn asked her to do so. But the guy does not react. The protagonist realizes that he suffers from sleepwalking. First, she needs to carefully get out of there. She raises her foot and tries to throw the prince off herself, but she feels something bulging out of him. The young lady tells His Highness to wake up, but he only presses her harder against the bed and kisses her. Rosetta is stunned by this, and she quickly pulls Armand under her and holds him so he doesn't do anything else. The girl realizes that this isn't like him, and the prince is acting like an animal right now. The boy looks at his maid with a look full of hatred. Rosetta realizes that the rumors about his madness were not because of his difficult character, but because of this disease. She wonders if he behaves like that with the other maids, but now it's more important than that. The young lady apologizes to His Highness and puts her hand on his head. The guy wakes up and asks what the girl is doing here. After all this, the protagonist sits at the table, and the brunette offers her to drink a soothing tea. Rosetta thanks him and wonders what happened since he himself made her tea. The girl claims that she came there for a reason, Madame Reborn. Armand asks if she can tell him what she saw. The protagonist says that he did not react to her words and showed great strength, and when she approached him, he immediately jumped on her. His Highness says that he must have been like an animal that follows only its instincts. The guy realizes that he made a mess again while he was sleeping, and the young lady concludes that they pounced on the other maids. The brunette apologizes for that, and Rosetta says it's no big deal since she wasn't hurt. Armand says that he must have shown quite a bit of strength and asks how the girl handled him. The protagonist states that she has already said that she is very strong. The prince asks her to stop joking around. The girl with a serious expression says that if he doesn't believe her, they can arm wrestle. The brunette smirks and says she suggested it. He also says, "Hey, then don't cry." The guy thinks she will see the result and won't be able to talk like that anymore, so he suggests they start, but the young lady claims she has already started. His Highness feels the pressure on his arm and asks where the girl got how much strength from. Rosetta just smiles and says she was born so strong. She asks if this is all His Highness can do and settles his hand on the table. Armand doesn't understand how he could lose, and the girl takes the chance and says since she won, who will ask one question. The young lady asks if by any chance he is going to kick her out too. The brunette thought she was going to ask if he was crazy. The guy is silent, so the protagonist claims that today she did not say her wish. After all, they agreed that His Highness, will fulfill one of her wishes a day. The girl asks not to dismiss her and claims that this is the wish. The prince asks if his young lady is afraid of him, and the young lady claims that he is not acting this way on purpose, but Armand asks how she can be sure of that. Rosetta grabs his hand and claims it's because His Highness is a good man and she wants to protect him, a madness that not even a priest can cure. The guy has been suffering from this unknown disease for the 3rd year. If the first prince finds out about his madness, it will give him an excuse to attack him. Therefore, no maid who learned his secret survived. However, Rosetta has saved him twice already. She is a special maid. Armand says she should move closer, to the room next to his. The protagonist does not understand what he is talking about, and the prince asks her to serve him at night. The young lady looks at him. The one with a blush on his cheeks thinks that it will be too strange if he says that she is special. It would be more correct to call her unusual. The next day, the protagonist knocks on Valerian's room and tells him it's her. The blonde opens the door lightning fast and asks if Rosie came to him by herself. After that, as the girl tells him yesterday's story, he has only one question: what she was doing in the guy's room at night. The young lady asks why the guy speaks so disparagingly of the prince, but the blonde only cries out, asking her to say that it's all idle rumors. She wasn't in his room at night. Rosetta feels the grip of his hand and asks why Valerian is so angry. The boy claims that people are saying she shared a bed with the prince last night. The protagonist angrily cries out who is spreading such nonsense. The red-haired knight gets goosebumps. Valerian sighs in relief. He states that he knew it was all a lie. He thinks he overreacted, so he tries to change the subject and says he'll make Rosie some coffee. The main character sits at the table with a fork and knife. She looks at the appetizing dessert and claims that after Valerian's pancakes, any treats seem bland to her now. The blonde says it's only natural since she adores them so much. The young lady begins the meal. She thinks how nice and quiet it is in the palace. The girl offers her interlocutor a story about what happened today, because no matter how great a magician he is, he cannot know about her past lives. The Archimage agrees and says that he has been waiting for this. The girl tells him over a meal what happened and asks him what he thinks about it. Valerian says that he doesn't like that because of some guy. Rosie went back so many times. The protagonist cries out that it's not a guy, but a prince. The young lady realizes that for some reason in this life, the blonde really dislikes Armand. The Archmage turns to Rosetta. He approaches her face and wipes the remains of the dessert with his finger. He licks his finger from the cream and asks how the girl, being so sloppy, manages to be a servant, asks if maybe in this life she will just become a worker in his lab. The protagonist rises from her chair. She grabs the blonde man's hand and says that since he decided to lick off the residue, let him do it to the end. The girl pulls the Archmage's hand closer to her and licks the remains of the dessert off his hand. Valerian's face floods with color. He wonders when only his sweet little sister had time to become such a gorgeous lady. He cries out her name and asks with a puppy dog look if she really doesn't want to. The protagonist realizes that when he looks at her like that, she begins to doubt. However, she didn't come back so much for nothing. The young lady says that if he wants to please her, then let him fulfill one request. Then she pulls out a list of all the existing poisons and asks if Valerian can make a device that will detect them. The girl claims that such a thing exists, but it detects too few varieties. The blonde asks if she's doing this because of the prince and claims he doesn't like him. But he says that of course he will help Rosetta because he doesn't want her to be in danger. The protagonist thanks Valerian for always helping her. After that, the girl states that she has to go. The archmage asks why so soon. The young lady claims that she is moving to the chambers next door to the prince, so she needs to move her things there. The blonde man is shocked. He realizes he's never been so jealous before. When the protagonist is done, she is happy that she managed so quickly since she doesn't have much stuff. Suddenly, she hears someone calling her name. It's Melanie. The young lady says how good it is that her friend is here, for she has been looking for her. The young lady asks what happened. Melanie, on the other hand, does not hesitate to ask her friend if she slept with the prince last night. The protagonist claims that she didn't, and her friend asks if that means that Rock's words about Rosetta spending all night in the prince's bedroom are lies. The red-haired lady claims that she was moving around in there and fell asleep on the couch. Melody breathes a sigh of relief. She had already made up all sorts of things for herself. She asks why her friend moved into the other room. She says that she is a personal maid and should always be there. When the lady with green hair does not hear the word near, she remembers that her friend said that there is a man with whom she wants to become closer and asks if this man is the prince. At this time, Armand is walking down the hallway, but when he turns the corner and sees the two men, he hides. He wonders what they are talking about. Melanie at the time asks if Rosetta loves the prince, and her friend says that she wouldn't believe her if the answer was no, after all. The green-haired lady claims she doesn't know, as she's not one to throw around words. His Highness at this time comes to the realization that Rosetta loves him, so all this time she has had feelings for him. After this, the protagonist is in the kitchen with the maids. Richard speaks even lower and presses a young man with red hair with his foot. The same asks Rosetta to forgive him, but the knight kicks him in the back and asks how dare he address him as you. Then Rock cries out for Miss Rosetta to forgive him. The protagonist tells Sir Richard that he shouldn't do that, because the guy could just be imagining things. But the knight says that he didn't like Rock before, and now he finally has a reason to deal with him. Rosetta says that then they can just tell the guy not to start any more rumors like that. Melanie asks if the girl thinks that's enough. The young lady claims that he doesn't look as tired lately, and she's seen him pecking his nose at the post. When Richard hears this, he is furious. The red-haired young man realizes he won't get off easy and shakes in fear. The knight grabs Rock, says they will talk separately, and drags him by the scruff of the neck. Protagonist Sun states with an innocent expression that she probably shouldn't have said that. Afterward, she comes to clean the prince's chambers. When she does, His Highness looks at her, but doesn't show it, because when the young lady turns around, he immediately stares at his book. Rosetta wonders why he's acting so strange today and asks Armand if she's done something wrong. The brunette says that everything is fine and she shouldn't pay attention to it. But the protagonist keeps asking questions. She asks if His Highness is not feeling well, because his face is flushed. The guy claims that he has already said that everything is fine. Then the maid tells him to look at her. The prince looks at her face and realizes that she doesn't even know that he accidentally overheard that conversation about the man Rosetta wants to get closer to. He frantically flips through the pages of the book and wonders if that's why the girl has been acting like that all this time. Armand recalls all those moments spent with the maid and concludes that she just liked him, but for some reason he feels uneasy when he looks into her eyes. The young lady smiles and approaches the brunette. She states that she is done with the cleaning and asks if she can use her wish for the day. His Highness agrees. The protagonist, on the other hand, folds her arms and asks Togo to call her by her name, since the guy has never called her that once. The girl claims that when a special person calls her name, her mood immediately improves. Arment wonders if she said special person, because if so, she doesn't even hide her feelings. His Highness says he will call her when he needs something from her. Rosetta gets a little upset and thinks he's not going to honor her request. The boy asks what the priest said today. The young lady claims that he said that she is healthy and will live another 100 years. The guy says he understands and then states that she can go if she has done everything. The protagonist gets a little upset and walks out into the hallway. The brunette, on the other hand, is immersed in his thoughts. He remembers how the girl claimed with a smile on her face that she is healthy and will live another 100 years. His Highness is a little embarrassed by this and smiles. Rosetta is disturbed by the prince's behavior. She wonders if something unforeseen might happen. But she is pulled out of her thoughts by the maid, who tells her to follow her, for Countess Milliam is looking for her. Rosetta. She does not understand why she could need her, because she is a supporter of the current empress. The protagonist enters the woman's room and is greeted. The countess asks if the girl is the prince's personal maid, and the young lady says that she is. She says that her name is Rosetta. The woman says that it is very unusual for the prince to let a servant girl get so close to him. The countess says that the girl is quite pretty. The protagonist realizes that at such moments, one should pretend as if she didn't understand anything. She thanks her interlocutor. The Shaitan girl says that there are rumors that Rosetta spent last night in the prince's room. The young lady says that on Madame Roblan's orders, she only changed the wood in the fireplace and left. But the woman only laughs loudly and says that she has no doubt it was so. She then asks if Rosetta saw anything suspicious last night in the prince's room. The protagonist ponders whether the countess might be checking up on her, but she only knows what Maria's maid told her. Even if the ward has heard about the death of the rumor lurking in the prince's room, she surely knows that he gets very violent at night. In that case, she shouldn't be told anything. The young lady claims that she only noticed that His Highness was sleeping so soundly that not even his breathing could be heard, and she is worried if his health is all right. The brown-haired girl states that she understands and asks as soon as the girl has the tongue to blatantly lie to her. She smirks and asks if the girl knows that she can't stand those who are dishonest with her, and then orders that the servant girl be stripped of her tongue. Several servants come in from the corridor. They grab the protagonist and twist her hands behind her back. Rosetta realizes that these guys she could put down with one blow, but if she shows her abilities, she will begin to be suspected. So the young lady cries out that she's not lying and it's all true. But the knight only tells her not to snarl and asks if these are the maid's last words while her tongue is still in place. The protagonist thinks whether it is better to use force and escape from there or to sacrifice her tongue to keep the prince's secret. The girl realizes that it will be painful, but Valerian can heal her after all. So Rosetta says that if they have decided to punish her, she dare not resist, but she really doesn't know anything. The knife-wielding Schotten asks how long she's going to keep talking and claims she'll be done quickly. The protagonist realizes, for the prince's sake, she can endure the pain. But at the last moment, someone enters the room and interrupts all this action. A blonde man asks what's up and if they are having fun. It's Greyhan Ishabeth von Ragnar. He asks why the servants caught the poor maid. Everyone kneels down and salutes His Highness. The countess asks what brings him here, and he claims he came to check on his mother, but he heard screams. The blonde claims that he couldn't just leave when he treats a beautiful girl like that. The boy says that he was also interested in this poor maid, but the woman claims that she is not worth His Highness's interest, as she is only the prince's maid. Greyhan says that's even better then. He didn't know Armand was being served by such a girl. The blonde approaches the maid and tells her to follow him. Rosetta thinks this guy is the nastiest person she has ever met. In her past life, when she was a knight, he laughed at her, saying that girls shouldn't hold a sword, and when he found out about her abilities, he tried to hire her into his service. The protagonist thinks it's certainly a good thing he didn't let her lose her tongue, but she doesn't want to mess with him. The The blonde turns around and asks what the cutie's name is. The young lady replies that her name is Rosetta. His Highness then addresses her by name and asks if the girl realizes that he got her out of a dangerous situation and thinks that she should thank him.